Howdy y'all, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for being here. The stories that we tell, the illusions of grandeur, which we paint for ourselves, and the things we believe possible. Some use these gifts, this driving force, for good, but others, even in ancient accounts, use these gifts nefariously. As structures of massive proportions, steel and freestanding, began to flood the greatest cities around the world during the onset of the 20th century, we also have stories of confidence men attempting to use these constructions, these immaculate creations, to swindle the public. The most infamous of these stories comes to us from none other than the Big Apple, New York City. In this case, it may be seen as a combination of ambition and an unwillingness to quit, which was at the heart of this story. What I want to focus on are the few artistic renditions we have of this supposedly possible construction. We will briefly discuss the narrative presented and see what stands out to us. Also, the channel just hit 39,000 subscribers, and due to that substantial milestone, I'd like to take some time in this video to thank those of you who have contributed to the channel in the last month. Those of you who wanted them, I have sent out the t-shirts that I created for my channel, and I'm glad to see that so many of you are joining this little community that we have together, and I'm ever grateful. That being said, I want to give a special thanks to those who helped the channel grow this past month. This video will be, for all intents and purposes, photographs of New York mixed with artistic renditions of proposed concepts within the greater New York metropolitan area. Just a few of the unseen images that I felt like sharing. I'll wrap up the video discussing the 700-foot tall globe structure proposed and supposedly nearly built in the heart of the Coney Island area. But first, let me give a special thank you to Brian Goodlander, to Drumstick and Urban Instrumentalist. These are the three who contribute music to my videos, and they will be playing in the background of most of my videos. They make this sort of ambiance of the videos possible, so I want to say thank you very much. Also, thank you for the donations from Marcy S., Eric from Streets of Tartaria, my friend Logan Roth, who's always rocking his Jarid Boosters tee and sending me beautiful photographs of the places that he visits. Veronica M., Devin Wolf, I appreciate you both, thank you. Tisa C., Scout Wynn, Caleb Pierce, Jose C., Francis O.M., Teresa Callahan, Michael G., Tatiana. Thank you all so much for contributing to the channel this month. So if any of you just mentioned have not received your t-shirt yet, or just want to reach out to me, you have my email address, but I think we are all squared away there, and I appreciate you all so much. Now, for the rest of you, and for those who enjoy this content, let's get right back into these images of New York. If you remember for a second some of my older videos, and if you haven't checked those out, you definitely should. I have one on the Penn Station of New York City and the immense architecture which it encompassed, which included at the time some of the oldest indigenous sites in New York City. And in that video, we looked through some of the oldest photographs, and they're very revealing. I also have a detailed video, strictly the oldest photographs of New York City in general, which in my opinion is pretty epic. It's over a half an hour long of just straight images, the oldest ones of New York City, unseen images from private collections, so that's definitely worth checking out. I also have a video about the orphan trains and much of that narrative that we've been presented with in the current timeline. Whether it's a full truth or a half truth, it ties back to the greater New York area, to underground settlements, to lost or recovered people, to a new education system being put in place, and to the systematic removal of certain groups in New York City in the mid to late 1800s through this orphan train program. Now, an interesting overarching theme seems to appear here as we look through all of these ancient ideas and these old world concepts, and that is underground travel. We have evidence that not only did the indigenous people of America, including the mound builders and the Iroquois, the Susquehannock, etc., build using these massive earthworks that were connected through these tunnelways, but we also have these same groups of indigenous people given credit for helping the European settlers to build out the original largest cities of America, including New York City. We have the Dutch working with the indigenous of the area, many times creating structures that were still standing today in the infrastructure of newly built buildings that were built quite literally on top of the earlier infrastructure. This is the same thing we see in Europe with Celtic structures, and the underground passageways under many of these buildings would be the influence many historians consider for the later subway. Now, as we look through all of that esoteric sort of history of New York City, it can all be tied to this massive structure right here. Now, on first glance, this appears to be something out of a science fiction novel, but we are actually told that construction really began on this massive superstructure, if you want to call it that, in the year 1906. But this was actually said to be a 700-foot tall solid sphere globe, which would be made to have certain alignments to the sun and to the stars. This was said to be made entirely out of steel, which at the turn of the century, from the 1800s into the early 1900s, steel was becoming something that really was being used to replace all of these old world structures. Now, I've pointed to it in some other videos, but beneath this steel, a lot of the time, you will still find red brick, which is something else interesting, but I digress on that for a moment. What I want to focus on is if this 700-foot tall giant steel sphere would really be viable in the year 1906. As we look through this narrative, we come to find that different aspects of this design, different things that were incorporated into this design, would then be borrowed in later years and would be used in more modern devices that actually were built. But we are told that construction really did begin on this giant 700-foot tall sphere in 1906. It was just never completed. So let's get right into it. This entire superstructure, the blueprint, the design, everything was put forward by a man named Samuel Friede. With confidence, Friede could present this structure, he said, at an estimated cost of $1.5 million in 1906, which, estimated for inflation, would be roughly $50 million today. He offered shares of this construction project to the public, promising 100% returns annually. At the time of Friede's proposal, the Flatiron Building was New York's go-to sight to see. However, the Friede Globe Tower would have been over 3 times the height of the Flatiron Building, with the Globe Tower standing at an estimated 700 feet tall. It was also a globe tower, meaning with the globe shape, it was quite spacious on the interior. Upon completion, the Friede Globe Tower would have been the largest building in the entire world, having 11 unique levels, each with its own specific theme and design. Basically, everything that New York became in later times was planned to originally be housed within this giant, spherical superstructure. But it gets better, or stranger, depending on how you look at it. As we dive into the details provided in the article, which I will link down below, we're told the foundations of this massive sphere were said to run for nearly 4 stories underground, all the while having interchanging underground levels, with one level being a railway station, one level being a subway station, one level being a massive parking garage, and the final level was, get this, a pier with a sea tunnel which would connect to the greater rivers of the New York area. What's wilder in this entire narrative, we're told of the 11 above ground levels or floors, none of them would begin until over 150 feet in the air. The first level, which began at 150 feet, was to be a pedestal garden, which was to contain, in a sense, hanging gardens, a full vaudeville theater, a full-size roller rink, a full-size bowling alley, plus a casino. The second level, which was said to begin at 250 feet, was to include an indoor circus or track, also called the Hippodrome, which was intended to seat over 5,000 people, and it was said to contain animals from the 4 major continents of that time. At 300 feet or the third level, was to be the globe's main hall. If completed, it would have been the largest ballroom in the entire world, which contained a rotating restaurant, one that would circle the entire giant sphere, completely made out of glass. At 350 feet would be a more dry, desert-like garden, also known as the Palm Gardens, containing the less tropical plants from around the world. At 500 feet would be the Grand Sphere's observation tower, which would give unobstructed views for up to 50 miles in all directions. At 600 feet was planned to be the United States Weather Observation Bureau and wireless telegraph station, which would contain the largest searchlight in the entire world. The Globe Tower was to be fully illuminated at night, resembling a great ball of fire, according to this narrative. The process was seemingly begun on construction. The over $1 million were raised, and the foundations were dug. The tunnels underground began, and the cornerstone was laid on May the 26th of 1906. The process continued onward, and if this really was almost built, even if it was later canceled, if all this infrastructure really was started and it was dug, why have most of us never heard about this Antiquitech masterpiece before? Was this hidden, so to speak, because it was a major folly in the history of New York City, essentially showing how one man, who is nowadays considered to be a charlatan, could have deceived the people of New York to give up all of this money for this construction, only to have it fail? Or was this actually hidden for a more nefarious reason? Was it possibly too advanced for its time? Because nowadays, we see the same sort of ideas that were presented in this design, in this blueprint, that were considered to be radical, including revolving restaurants, fully illuminated steel towers, hanging indoor gardens. These all appear in modern times in some of the most unique buildings around the world. But we're talking about one specific structure in 1906 that would have contained all these things. It's just food for thought. Now, continuing this narrative, we're told on February the 17th, 1907, an opening ceremony of sorts was held. It was declared that by May of that same year, the 11 floors of the structure would be completed. However, I could find no further photographic evidence of this structure being built besides these artistic renditions. We're told essentially nothing more about this actual build has been written, but instead that it was never completed, and by the beginning of 1908, being the largest structure in the world at that time, it's kind of inconceivable to think that the investors would have pulled out after only a year. But we're told that's exactly what happened. Basically, all the investors wanted their money back. Everything that was built above ground was destroyed, and everything that was built below ground, the infrastructure, all of these tunnels, all of these secret passageways, we're told all of that was filled in. And essentially, the whole plan was tucked under the rug, only for us to rediscover it over 100 years later. So what do you think? I would love to hear your thoughts and your comments down below. If you can find me any more information on Friede's Globe Tower, any blueprints, or any construction photographs of any kind, I'd love to hear about them in the comment section down below, and you can leave those links there and I'll share them with everybody. Thanks again for being here, sincerely, and for being part of the channel. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up and feel free to reach out to me and to share any ideas you have about where this channel should go moving forward. I'm still working on a couple of longer videos right now, one being my third video about the history of China and the surrounding dynasties, and I also have another really interesting video. A video I'm really looking forward to sharing with you, where we're going to be looking at some of the ancient works from the late 1700s and the early 1800s, written about the ancient land of Tartary, about Tartaria, and about the first men, or about these men who came from northern India and from Tartary, basically bringing with them the first language and the first religion and the first architecture, and with that came the Druids and came paganism, and how that all ties back to the Celtic people, and how the group we refer to as the Celts, or the Celtic people, really were the first that were part of this Tartarian empire. And they are the ones that in many instances, including indigenous myths and tales, are referred to as the mound builders, or these larger than usual specimens, these very large men, these Vikings who basically conquered the world. So that's a very interesting video, because the books I'll be referencing have countless earlier references to ancient Greek and ancient Roman writing. So we're going to be looking through a lot there, and there's a lot to decipher, but having all the references right in front of us, it's going to make it very easy to connect these dots. So I hope you join me for that. If you enjoy my content, subscribe, like, share this work, and help my channel to grow, and continue joining me so we can keep teaching each other these things about our ancient history. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next video. Cheers, guys.